Hi, welcome to the webinar. I'm Krista Campbell. Thank you for joining us today for Collector for ArcGIS. Is it really that easy? So today I'm really excited to welcome Jeff Shaner to our webinar. Jeff is a product manager in our applications group. I asked Jeff to join us this month because we've had a lot of questions about Collector for ArcGIS, particularly after our September webinar with LAX Water. So Jeff is going to demonstrate how to get started, beginning with setting up your ArcGIS online account, then building a web map, and finally downloading and using ArcGIS for Collector. So I'm expecting a really good webinar today, Jeff. No pressure or anything.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. So David Totman is going to actually get us started. You all know David. He's our industry manager for water. He's going to have a short discussion about how ArcGIS for Collector is transforming organizations with functionality and efficiency. So let's just get started. David?
Thank you, Krista. So yeah, just a real quick intro here, just kind of reflecting a bit, I think, on the year. And so that'll be pretty quick, and then again we'll turn it over to Jeff to get started. But I think just so Jeff and I kind of know the audience here, I'm going to have Krista start us off immediately with 2 polling questions, so that just kind of sets the stage for us and know who's out there. So Krista?
Sure, David. Start with our first polling question. Describe your current environment. Are you using Collector for ArcGIS already? Are you using ArcGIS Online but you haven't implemented Collector for ArcGIS? You're not using either ArcGIS Online or Collector, or you don't know. Okay, so it looks like it's somewhat evenly split between those answers. Only a few of you aren't sure. So Jeff, I hope you're paying attention. We've got about 37% saying they're using Collector. All right, thank you, you guys. We're going to close this.
And then right into the next one, Krista?
Sure. So our second polling question is, if you are using Collector, so that's for those 37% of you, how would you rate yourself? Advanced user, a moderate user, or you're just getting started? Okay, great. It's looking pretty good. We've got about 70% saying they're just getting started. So this webinar is going to be awesome. Yeah, so hopefully Jeff's presentation is going to be very useful for you. We're going to close this polling question, and back to you, David.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Krista. So yeah, this is great. You know, those that you're just getting started, yeah, there'll be lots of great content. But even for your advanced folks, I find that whenever I sit down and have a chat with Jeff, I always learn something new about the product, you know, even though it's been out quite some time. And so it's really what I want to talk about, and this is why we're kind of gathering here in December as well, and you know, hopefully have a little bit of fun here at the end of the year. But you know, as we've gone through 2016 and every conference we go to, every customer site, you know, we've been seeing this transformation with Collector. And you know, a quick little history lesson, you know, I mean, it's definitely evolved since it was first released. You know, in the beginning, you know, it could collect points and everyone's like, oh, you know, yay. But it obviously quickly evolved much faster, you know, with then going into lines and polygons. But, you know, disconnected really, that was the thing that really started taking off. And as people could finally, you know, how easy it was to go disconnected, to download you know, your data to the phone or whatever, and go disconnected, collect your data, and then synchronize. But then, you know, people weren't satisfied, and what really then launched, you know, a second wave then was those related tables, right, which just launched the inspections. So, you know, that really kind of just opened up the door and allowed people to do exactly what they wanted, like hydrant inspections and things of that nature, you know. And then there was, you know, folks weren't satisfied, wanted even more, and that's when the companion apps started to come out with additional functionality with Navigator and Workforce and what have you. And then really, as Krista kind of opened the session here, you know, we had LAX on and talked about the high accuracy, and that's really taken off. So we just had a ton of conversations. That's why, you know, Jeff's here today. Is a lot of folks, you know, have talked about how successful they've been with Collector, but again, there's always that little nuance. There's always that little button to push, that little configuration that really enhances what's going on. And from a process efficiency piece, that ease of use and cost effective. I would love to say, read my lips, but you can't because it's a webinar. There really has been this. I haven't talked about that. There we go. So we talk about going from easy to hard, and then going from points to high accuracy. We've just had this escalating functionality, and so with respect to that ease of use and cost, it's with the ArcGIS Align, those are using ArcGIS Align and Collector. You know how cost effective it is, but from the ease of use, what's been resounding has been, everyone gets to use it on their phone. That's really changing kind of the whole handheld market, especially with some of our high accuracy. Folks are saying, well, the training's nothing because, everyone's using their phone, and this app is designed, as a phone app or tablet app, and training is, literally 15 minutes, and folks are off and running because it's quite intuitive. So, although results may vary, but I think that's one of the most exciting things is, folks have also said, Esri, you finally got it, right? You finally made this thing, that all of us can use. You don't need a GIS degree to get out there and start collecting data. But with all that being said, it's definitely professional grade, right? So we see this being, used within the water utilities and the water resources. A lot of the water resources folks like the fact that they can go offline because, let's face it, when you're out in the middle of a watershed somewhere, there's not much cellular activity, and so you can definitely go offline. And for those that even talk about the high accuracy, it's if you have really good photography, sometimes you get pretty accurate with your thumb or a stylus. So it's really been an amazing year with Collector. It really has been transforming utilities. I think we finally kind of knocked it out of the park with this one. That an application that plugs right in the whole web GIS, web maps. People are able to configure in desktop and roll something out very quickly. Really has also transformed a lot of folks' mobile strategies, right? So anyway, probably enough of that. I want to kind of turn this over to Jeff and let him get started. But just it's been a pleasure, talking to all of you folks this year, and looking forward to getting to the Q&A piece. So with that, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over.
Thanks, David. It has been a pretty busy year for us, and thank you for having me in this webinar today. And hopefully, given the polling results that we saw, that the information here will really help you along in the process of deploying Collector in your organization. So what I wanted to do is first kind of set the agenda with a few slides. I think one of the things that kind of brought this webinar to life was a story that we shared with Travis Anderson from Leax Water District, where as you mentioned, through the evolution of our releases of Collector, one of the key new functionality pieces that we added in this last release was the ability to connect to external GNSS receivers. And this is a picture of Travis actually marking fire hydrants using Collector with an EOS Aero GNSS receiver connected to Ohio State's RTK network, and able to collect that with extremely high accuracy. And what's really cool about Travis is that by trade he's an engineer, and he uses GIS kind of as a sideline, and he found Collector pretty easy to pick up and use. And Krista and everyone here today did a webinar with them recently, and you can go and watch that webinar to see his experiences as well. But let's talk about how to get going with Collector. And when I first talked to Krista and David about this, they actually said, can you set up an ArcGIS Online organization? I thought, that's just crazy. You guys want me to do that in a demo? Okay, we're going to do that today. We're going to try to anyway. And secondly, show how to create a web map. Do something from scratch, and then show how to download and use a Collector on a device. So we're going to try to go through all of those. I've got some slides to follow up in case we crash and burn at any point in time. So let's try to jump in and do that first demo of setting up an ArcGIS Online organization. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to a web page here, and you'll notice that the URL, it gets you to the evaluation of ArcGIS Online. I've tried to kind of fill this out already with a bogus Gmail address that I created called Esri Water Webinar, confirmation for that, a username Water Webinar, and I set my industry, and that's also very important because Maria and Krista can track that and see who in what industry is actually setting up trial organizations. So when I click Start Trial, what that's going to do is it's actually going to send me an email. And I'm going to go over to another tab in my browser where I've got that Gmail account, and in came the activation email. So if I click on that, then you can see a link to go and create my new ArcGIS Online organization. So I'm going to click on that activation link, and it's going to ask me for a username. This is the administrator username that we're going to log into, and it's going to be the one that we'll talk about in a little bit that controls everything we do in our organization. I'll call it Esri Water Webinar, and let's give it a password called water.webinar1. Water.webinar1. I'm going to change it after we're done. Well, there it is for you now. And then we need to give the organization a name. So I'm going to call it Esri Water Webinar because I'm so creative. And what city were you born in? We're going to say Redlands, California. That's our security question. I'm going to accept the terms. Of course, if I were you, I'd read all those terms, but I work here, so I figured I could just accept them, right? And I'm going to click Create My Account. And that's going to go off, hopefully, and create our new ArcGIS Online subscription.
And Jeff, that's the email that when I talk to people, say, well, you got ArcGIS Online, they're like, no, we don't. We got desktop and server, but we don't have ArcGIS Online. And it's like, well, yes, you do, because of our entitlement program. Every account, that's the email that a lot of people can't find in their inbox, or it went to Joe, and Joe doesn't work here anymore. And so that's that one email that really starts the game.
Cool. All right, so we have our organization name now. It's called Esri Water Webinar, and we need to give it a short name as well. So I'm going to just be even more creative and call it Esri Water Webinar again. And you can see as I filled it out, underneath it's building a URL, and it's telling you whether or not that actual short name is available. Now, ArcGIS Online just updated last night, and they did a significant change in that you could actually change that organization short name now if you want. So if you're not happy with the name that you give it, you can go in as the administrator and change it if you'd like. The next step is to kind of set a browser language, or sorry, a language for the organization, a default language, and I'm just going to use the browser's default, which is going to be English clearly. Also a region. So for the region, I'm going to say it's the United States. Oops. Right, and then you're going to choose the method of security that you want to use. And if you're new to setting up ArcGIS Online, I would ask you to really think hard about this one. And the default setting is to allow HTTPS only, and I would encourage that because that's the most secure way to store and manage all the information inside of ArcGIS Online. And that becomes the transport protocol for your use throughout the platform with it. So we can add a contact us link if we want. We're not going to do that. We're going to save and continue. And this is going to configure our ArcGIS Online organization. There we are. Now you've got a little choice. You can continue or you can go get some apps. We're going to show the getting the apps in a little bit. So I'm going to tap continue with ArcGIS Online. And what I wanted to do next was kind of navigate you a little bit through ArcGIS Online before we get to the next step. So you can see at the very, very top of our subscription that we just created, our ArcGIS Online organization, a set of tabs. We're sitting on the My Organization tab, and if you're an administrator of an organization like we are because we just created this, you have additional privileges. You can edit the settings. You can change some of the settings we just did. You can invite members to the organization, so we can add users. They could be your field testers that you want to add. You can view status and other things. You can also manage licenses. So part of your subscription and your trial as well is the ability to get trial licenses of other applications like ArcGIS Desktop or ArcGIS Pro, and you can manage them directly from here and give those licenses to certain named users. If you move across the tabs, I'm going to skip the My Content tab because we're going to come back to that, and I'm going to click on Groups. I'm going to highlight the things that are really important for you as a collector user or deploying collector. There's much more to your ArcGIS Online organization than what I'm going to show you today, but I'm going to just highlight the key points. Groups are important because that's the way that you share maps for use with your field workers. And inside of ArcGIS Online, I can create a new group. So I'm going to click Create a Group, and I'm going to give that group a name. Field Data Collection. I'm going to add a great summary. This is for collector field users. I'm going to copy and paste that, give it a meaningful tag, hopefully, like collector rocks. And then, you like that tag? That's a good tag. I think it is too. And then I can choose the status of this group, and it's really the permissions for people to see it. That could be public, meaning that other users inside of your organization can look for it and see it and ask to join it. You could make it private, so if you don't want to share that with Krista or David, you don't have to. They won't be able to even see it. So there's a lot of control you have over that group, and you can control the access of who can update information in that group too. So, you know, if you want to just lock it down so that only you can add content and be a contributor, you could do that. Or we, in the context of sharing, we're going to make it available for everyone. So the other thing that I wanted to do was I'm going to go and click on next to the name where you can set an icon. And I'm actually going to, I need to browse up a bit. I'm going to choose a file. And this is going to browse my file folders, and it's right into a folder that I'm going to talk about in a minute, where there's a whole set of icons that have been created for you to kind of take up and use. I'm going to click this field operations PNG file, and if I click OK and then I hit save, now we're going to have this new group, and it's going to have this wonderful new field data collection icon. All right, so I'm going to pause in the demo part of it right now, and I'm going to go back to our slides here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we just did. So what we did was we went to the trial login page and the free trial page, and we entered in our username and our email address and our industry. And then we followed a bunch of steps. But I wanted to point out that there are some learned lessons for how you can set up an ArcGIS organization. And we're going to share these slides out afterwards, so you can click on the link and get at all of that detail. There's also another learned lesson that's really about managing a mobile workforce. It talks about those groups and how to set up maps and all that stuff. I also wanted to mention some key tips for success that I've seen from the customers I've talked with. One is look to find a sponsor. So if you're a GIS manager in your organization, what really makes it successful from a deployment perspective is find that field user that maybe is more willing to take on using smartphones or tablets in their day-to-day work. Maybe they're a bit techy, and really try to bring them up to wanting to be the sponsor for you. Find a kind of a project that isn't necessarily on the critical path for your organization, but adds key business values. Make sure to align with your IT folks if you're not in the IT group already, especially if you want to leverage data within your organization in what we kind of refer to as a hybrid mode, where you're using ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Online. You're going to need to get adoption of mobile device access inside your organization. And don't try to tackle all your problems at once. Take baby steps and learn from those successes and failures. And you're going to have both along the way. So just a few quick tips there. Next thing I wanted to talk about in the steps that we did, oh, I went too fast, was that we signed up from the email. We clicked on that confirmation link. We created the administrator username and password. I didn't go through the process of creating a bunch of named users. I figured that you can sort that one out yourselves. There are a bunch of different ways that you can do that, and that Learn lesson can really help you out through that. Also, providing that organization name was really key. Then we set up some of the basics, right? I would say the most important thing that we determined was both the short name and also the security access. So providing that out, I think you don't want to really go flipping around between HTTPS and HTTP for security, but you can go and change that within your organization. It has some ramifications if you do, but I would say set it up first, and that's maybe where you want to talk to your IT folks about it before you move any further. So inside of your organization, you can invite members. I went through the administrator's user experience, and linked into this slide is how you can go and understand the different methods of inviting members. So important to know about Collector and ArcGIS Online is that it has its own user store, but it also can connect to what we call enterprise users, meaning that you can use your own Active Directory and use users from that directly inside of ArcGIS Online. So if you want to do that instead of manually creating users or loading them from like a text file, you can do that. The way that you organize content is through groups. Everything inside of ArcGIS Online we refer to as an item, and items are shared using groups. So the web maps that we're going to create, the layers that we're going to create, everything that the web apps you can create, all of them are considered items inside of ArcGIS Online. It's the way of indexing things inside of the folder structure that's stored in the cloud. You can monitor usage. That's something that's not commonly known, but as an administrator, you can go in and look at what users are using what applications, when they logged in last, and get a sense of your adoption. There's much more you can do there as well. Now, when I created the group, I wanted to mention this because there's a lot more to it than just that. But as a tip, you can see that there's a model organization for water utilities. You can download that using the link that's provided, and that has home screen banners that you can use. It has the icon like the field data collection group icon that I used, and much more inside of it. So I encourage you to go and download that model organization as well, because it has a lot of really valuable content inside of it. Okay, the groups view. I mentioned this already. That's how content's shared. You can create groups. Everyone with a named user that, again, ArcGIS Online updated last night. So for those of you that already have organizations, you'll see that a new level of licensing came in this morning. It's called Level 1 and Level 2 licensing. Level 2 is what you know today as a named user if you're already an existing user. A Level 2 license can create groups that can create new content. Level 1, think about it as a viewer-only role. So you have that control now. If you want to just have viewers inside of your organization that don't actually add or contribute content, You can create new users using that level 1 role if you want. Some tips: create a dedicated group for field data collection. All the users that you have in the field, like your sponsor and others, you share into that group as well as the content that you provide. And I'll show that to you in a minute. So let's move over to the My Content view, and let's go to the demo and use this slide as a recap. So back over to our screen in ArcGIS Online where we created that group, I'm going to click on My Content. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a new web map and a new web layer for use in Collector right from scratch. And this isn't very well advertised by us, but actually inside of ArcGIS Online we have a whole suite of templates. And if in my contents view, it's kind of like your folder view on your file system, I can click Create Feature Layer. And a feature layer is where you house all the features that you collect out in the field. You can see there's a bunch of categories by different industries. There's quite a few different templates in here. I'm going to click on Water Utilities, and you can see even in the Water Utilities vertical we have a lot. So the one that I'm going to create from, we're going to call Watering Violations. We're going to go click Create on that. There's one layer inside of it called Water Restriction Violation. We're going to define an extent. Since we're out here in the LA area, I'm just going to drag a rough box around that. Click Next, give it a name, call it CA Water Violations, and it pre-populates some information for us, some tags that help us find things, and a summary view. And it saves it into a folder, and I'll get back to that in a second. And when I click Done, what it's going to do is it's going to go create a new hosted feature layer inside of our organization. That layer is the foundation for all of the data types that you can collect in the field that's specific to water violations. And when that creates, it's going to give us the details of that item. Now, I'm going to click back on my content before we look at that a little bit more. But you can see there's this concept of folders. I can create new folders, and you can think about it as I've got this base folder structure for me as a named user, and I can organize everything I build into subfolders that are within that main folder. So I just want to point that out. Now, this is that new item that we created. It's CA Water Violations. If I click on it, it's going to open up those details back to where we were, right? And there's no data in it yet, but there's some key things that I want to point out. First, you see that, well, clearly it has a thumbnail that you could modify if you want, and like I mentioned earlier, the model organization has a bunch of icons if you want to spruce that up. Also, you get to see the layers within. There happens to be one layer here. It's called Water Restriction Violation. Some really important things to note about it. One is that you can enable or disable attachments. Attachments are the way that you can capture photos inside of Collector out in the field. So if we want to document the violation with a photo, then we'd want to enable attachments. By default, this template has them already enabled for us. Likewise, there's a bunch of settings. So if I click on the Settings tab, there's a bunch of things in here that apply to Collector. A good one, as a rule of thumb, especially if you share in a group where you let anybody access it, is preventing it from being deleted. Because all your data is stored there, you don't want somebody to delete it on you. So you can protect it by deleting that, or by preventing that web layer from being deleted. The other thing that's really important here is the settings on the feature layer itself for editing access. These are all adhered to by Collector. So if we want to enable editing, which of course we do, that's what we're going to add features into. You can check that. It's checked by default. If you wanted to have additional layers that you don't want to be edited, you could disable it and you can be using them in Collector. You can also keep track of who created and last updated features. That's really key because it actually stores with every feature that's captured in the field with Collector who captured it or who updated it, when did they collect it, when did they update it. So you have this audit trail on your features based upon who the editor was. And then you can actually control the type of editing. So if, for example, I only wanted people to add new features, they could never modify an existing feature that somebody else created, I could change those settings so that the type of editing they can perform is really restrictive. We could also choose to determine what features editors can see. I'm going to leave that to all editors. I'm going to change this back so we could all update it. What features can editors edit? Can they edit all features or features that they own? This requires that tracking setting, but you know, we've got who's edited what, so now we could say, well, Krista could only ever edit features that she created, and she can't edit ones that I create because I don't want her touching my features. You can also change the access control. So there's a lot of settings there. The one last one I wanted to mention was sync. And that's important for offline map use. So if you want to take maps offline inside of Collector, you're going to need to enable the sync capability. So let's go back to the overview for a second. And there's additional features in here. We're gonna just focus on those for now. Something, if you're already an ArcGIS Online user, one of the really cool ones that came in this morning or late last night, if you were up late, is Create View, and that's to give you different representations, different editing control over views of that service. But that's something you can explore after. We're going to try and keep this one a little bit more simple. So I'm going to open in the map viewer, and what I'm going to do there is show you how you can further tweak some of the settings inside of a web map, because we need to create a web map for use within Collector. Here's the layer that got added. Of course, there's no features, right, because this is just a template. You can see what we call the, kind of the feature templates or feature types. And that's based upon the way that that layer was structured. So one of the things we could do is we could simply rename that layer. So if we just want to call it violations, we can do that. And we can change what we call the pop-up details. The pop-up is really the form representation inside of Collector. There's a title. That title is reflected in Collector when you tap on an existing feature that might have already been created. You'll see a quick tip that gives an attribute value, and you see all of the attributes. You also see this checkbox to show feature attachments. That's the photos that you collect, and so you could see those inside of the pop-up. I'm going to click Configure Attributes, and by default, when we created this template, there were all of these fields created for us. Right, and there's a display capability and an edit capability. All of these are reflected inside a Collector. So if you're wanting to control what they can visually see for different fields and what they can edit, you have that level of control inside of there. Also, there is a field alias which you can go and change. So if I wanted to change violation, let's say to violation type, and have that reflected when they see the form, I can do that. I can also provide a hint, so I could change that violation type to enter violation type, and that will show up inside of Collector. I'll try to remember to point that one out. The editor tracking fields are disabled. You can see that they're all here. They're not ones that you edit or really visualize much inside of the map, but they're stored as part of it, and you can make use of them. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to hit OK again, and now we've got that web layer that we've added into the map already set. Also to note, you can change the base maps, and the base maps change the way that you view reference information in Collector. So we're going to go with a satellite imagery reference. We can also add bookmarks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for our building here, well, our campus. Zoom into it, and I'm going to create a bookmark there, and I'm going to call it Esri Campus. All right, and I'm going to zoom back out to a little area around the Inland Empire of California, and then I'm going to hit Save. And I'm going to give this our name. I'm going to call it our awesome violation map. And I'll give it a nice collector rocks, oops, collector rocks tag. And this is for citing violations at David's house.
You know that, David. You got to keep
Oh,
an eye on
totally.
that.
I mean, that's where all the violations are going to happen, right? So we've saved that web map. Now the last thing we're going to do with it is we're going to share it because we want to be able to put it in a group so that everyone can access it. And I'm going to click on that, and you're going to see it popped up that it also wants to update sharing on another item, and that's the layer that we created. So it's really important that you share not only the map, but all the layers that are referenced inside of it so that everybody who's a part of that group has access to all the content within it. I'm going to update the sharing of that layer. Now both are going to be shared in that group. We come back to the groups page. You're going to see in our field data collection group, we're going to have two items in there, our awesome violation map and our web layer. So there they are. They're shared in that group. Anyone who's a part of that group can access that content. Right now it's just us, right? We didn't create any users, but also in the group details you can invite users to it. So that you can just have at it and play with that as you see fit. Let's go back to the PowerPoint again and kind of recap on that. So we talked about the My Content view. We showed you how all of the content that you create is stored inside of your local view of the system. The other thing that's interesting to mention that I didn't put on the slide is that as an administrator you have kind of superpowers, right? So I could go, and if Krista created some content and I want David to own it rather than Krista because we decided that we're going to fire Krista. Not that we would ever do that to you, Krista, right?
Jeff,
we love
I
you.
know where your office is.
but we could actually transfer all of her content over to David before we nuke her out of the ArcGIS Online subscription as a user. All right, so some tips. Again, like I mentioned, start simple. You can use these templates to create layers from scratch, go out into the field and do some simple based data collection. You're authoring a map. There's a lot of details into the map that you can then share inside of a group. You know, so let's go through a bit of those other details. There's one other thing I wanted to show you that's important for Collector that I forgot to mention. When we created that feature template, first off, we went through the templates that are there inside of ArcGIS Online. There are other ways to create content inside of ArcGIS Online. And I don't know if we'll get to it, but I do have a bonus slide about that. And that's really about how you can use ArcMap to take existing content you manage, say, in a file geodatabase and publish it up. It's a very simple process for doing that. And we call that internally kind of a by reference to a GIS server as well. So say you don't want to host it inside of ArcGIS Online, you want to leverage it with your own ArcGIS server, you can do that as well. Again, there's a lot of content and tips for that in the water solution templates that are also available for download and linked to here. We'll talk about relationships in a little bit as well. Relationships are important, right?
Yes, yes,
They are important. As long as you don't get too gabby with your next slides, we should have time.
No promise there. You know, we talked about when we created the water violations layer about the details, the item details, and photos being something that are part of attachments to a layer. I'll show that hopefully when we get into the desktop side, but in the geodatabase you can create attachments. Attachments are the data type that stores photos and recognized by Collector. Editing, control, the access, the tracking, the sync, all very important. In fact, there are advanced settings for the sync as well, so you can control the synchronization by behavior. I won't get into a lot of detail about that, but think about it kind of like your your email. If you're offline, so you're flying somewhere, but you're still working on your email, you can write new email on your phone, and then when you land, you can, if you're Krista, I mean, the plane just touches ground. You're not even to the gate yet, and she's, you know, off of airplane mode and working on her email. What happens is that not only does it send your email that you created, it also brings down any other emails that were created. And that's the default behavior with sync. Now, imagine you're out in the field and you've got a very low connectivity, and you're just a collector. All you do is contribute new content. Well, you can have finer grain control so that all you do is upload, and you never have to download everybody else's features. That gets really important when you're dealing with photographs, because photos can be quite large and you only want to update the things that you collect. You don't want to pull down everybody else's photos. So look into the sync details. There's some advanced settings there that you can get at. And those behaviors are actually on the web map, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Map properties, we showed you the bookmarks, the base map. There's also the one thing I missed showing you that I wanted to show you is the application settings. So we'll go to those map item details and I'll show that. That's where you find also the advanced offline mode that I was just talking about. And there's other layer properties like renaming it. I didn't set a scale dependency, so if we only want those features to show up at certain scales, we could do that. And also the form visibility of fields or the order, you can all adjust that in the pop-up. So if you've got a certain order on your feature class, if you're inside of desktop, you can even reorder that in the map representation in desktop, but you have a further way through the pop-up to organize and modify your content. All right, before we get to downloading and using Collector, let's just flip back over to this one more time to show the details of the web map, that piece that I actually missed before. So if we go to those details, and you can see it shows our layers and the folder it exists and all of that wonderful stuff. But if I go into the settings view, in the settings view, here we have those advanced offline options. Where, you know, maybe I want a little more fine-grained access to what can be downloaded and what can be synchronized, whether or not for read-only layers I want them at all, or whether I just want their attachments and whatnot. The other thing I wanted to mention is that in the application settings area, you can actually control feature functionality inside of Collector. So if I don't want anyone to change the base map, I can turn that off. If I don't want anyone to use the routing capabilities or the measure tool, I can do that. I could also add a different search capability. By default, it's set up to search addresses, but if I want to search against attributes and layers like a facility ID or a hydrant ID, I could do that by adding a query capability into the search. So I'm just going to turn back on the base map selector so we can see that. Okay, and I'm going to save that. Now, the next step, which you got a hint to with this slide, is we're going to download and use Collector. The first thing I wanted to mention is that Collector is supported on your Apple device, on an Android device, and on Windows 10 tablets. You'll notice that there's 4 stores listed here, and not just 3, even though there's 3 platforms. And that's because certain Android devices aren't necessarily certified for use with Google Play. A good example of that is a high-accuracy receiver from Leica called the Xeno 20. It doesn't have the Google Play Store on it, so you can actually download the Amazon App Store on your Android device. Collector's in the store there. You can search for it, get the application, download it, and install it. And you want to install from a store so that you can get the updates that are coming from us. And by the way, Collector's going to update with version 10.4.1 probably tomorrow. We've got another release that's coming right away here. And then inside of Collector, you can sign in on the device with that username that you created, which I got to remember what I just called it. I always forget that. and you can discover the map. So let's try to do that. Let's see if I can remember it. So here we have my iPad, and you can see I've already searched in the store. I really want to download egg, but we're going to do collector instead. I'm going to tap on the button for collector to download it, and hopefully this isn't going to take too long to download. Collector's a pretty small app, and that's downloading it directly onto our iPad, and then we can open it up. The other way that you can deploy applications is through a mobile device management tool. So if you have that in your organization, that's where it comes to talking to your IT staff, they can download it to their mobile device management system like Mobile Iron or Citrix Zen Mobile, and then deploy it out to devices so the mobile workers don't have to install it. All right, it did download, and you can see the very first time we open it up on our iPad, and similar experience on Windows 10 or on Android. You see that you have the option to sign in with ArcGIS Online or with Portal for ArcGIS. So Portal for ArcGIS is like taking ArcGIS Online and putting it all within your organization on premises and behind your firewall. And then you can fully control the deployment of users that way, and also content. Also at the very bottom there's a try it button. So if you haven't gotten to the point of creating a trial organization, you can click the try it button, and then we've got a set of web maps that you can go and play with and create new features into. I'm going to tap ArcGIS Online. And I gotta remember, I think I called it Esri Water Webinar. You guys remember what I called it? You were paying attention, right?
Sure, Jeff. Absolutely.
Watch, I got this wrong, I bet. Water dot webinar 1. Cross my fingers. And there you can see.
I told people how great you were, so I was
Me too. You can see that what it did was it signed in. We happen to be the one that created this map, but if we were other users, we would see the maps that are shared with us. And you see there's a button on the top left that says All Maps. And then it's also showing my maps, so maps that I've created in my user account or the group. And you click on it's all going to show the same because we've only created one thing. There's also a toggle between all and on device. So you'll see that if I downloaded maps to my device, I can quickly toggle between maps that are accessible in a connected way and those that are local to the device. If I tap the download button, that gives us the ability to download the map to our mobile device. And inside of here, you can choose your working area, the area that you're going to go out and do edits into or new collections into, and that cyan box actually controls whether or not you can add a feature. So if that feature is outside of that box, it's not going to let you create it. There's a second concept, which is the map detail, and that's really around the base map. And there's ways to optimize this as well. But by default, it's showing you one scale of the base map. If I start to zoom in, I can get more detailed content. But you see at the very bottom, the estimated size starts to go up. And that's showing you how much data is actually going to be downloaded to your device. So a tip on that is it's really relative to the work area. Think about doing this before you go out in the field. That's a pretty basic tip, huh? Also, I wanted to tell you that if I keep going in, at a point I'll hit this exceeds tile limit and reduce the area or the level of detail. If you're using Esri's base maps, that equates to what we call 100,000 tiles, which is roughly 2 gigabytes in size is the maximum size we'll let you get to. Because that payload downloading to your device is pretty large, and it's large on our servers as well. Now you can use your own servers, host your own content, and download through this experience if you want. There's this concept of hosted tile layers where you could publish them up and do that. But for this purpose, I'm actually not even going to download. I'm just going to show you this experience. There's also a way you could sideload those base maps as well if you want to copy over large maps. I'm going to tap and open up the water violations map and then collect a feature. We'll do this pretty quickly. So it showed our current location. Here we are on the Esri campus. Hopefully we're not violating the water restrictions of the city of Redlands. So let's instead, oh, and I wanted to point out, here are the different ways to collect data in this template. These are the types that we could collect. There's open violations and whatnot. That's controlled based upon the layer that you publish. Now, if I don't want to collect exactly where our GPS position is, of course, if you're doing high accuracy data collection, you're going to want to do that, right? We're getting, you can see on the bottom left, this GPS button showing we're getting about 3-meter accuracy with the GPS. Now we can connect to an external receiver like Travis Anderson did, get that down to the centimeter level if we want to connect to an RTK system. But we're going to just use the map itself. So there's a couple of things I can do. First, I want to choose the type of feature I want to create. It's an open violation. We're going to take your current location by default because really when you're out in the field, you should be collecting where you're at, right? But you could override that if you want. I can change it to be a point on the map. If I cancel this, just to show you another tip, I could just long press here and from the action button say collect here. So if it was a location that wasn't near where I'm currently at, I could always tap on the map and start my collection that way too. And it's got the location set, and now I can enter in all of the attributes like the property type. And here the layer was built with what we call coded value domains that appear as a pick list, and you can author those inside of ArcGIS Desktop if you want. I'm just going to set one of those attributes. The other thing that you can do, and we don't need to go through and set all of those attributes, the other thing you can do, and you'll notice it's at the very top, there's first of all, next to the cancel button, there's a little gear. That gear is looking at your required accuracy. So if you're using GPS and you want to set a required accuracy, you can do that. If you're capturing line or area features, you can also stream positions using the GPS, and you can change the streaming interval to be whatever you want as well. And you can control that accuracy either in metric or in imperial units with a setting inside of Collector. So if you don't like working in the metric system, I don't know why you would. I mean, most of the world does. Then you can change all the settings in Collector to go against imperial units. But also, you can tap that camera button, and because we had attachments, you can take a photo. So who's going to be the lucky candidate? I think maybe David. There we go. Let's take a picture of David, and we'll use that photo. And
yeah, he usually picks on me, so good job.
Yeah, I thought I'd give you a break there. And we'll hit the submit button. And hopefully ArcGIS Online likes the picture of David. Looks like it did. Surprise. And now that's back inside of ArcGIS Online. The last thing I wanted to show you inside of Collector, and there's much more to Collector that we're not talking about, but you can discover that as you get through more of it, is that settings dialog. And inside that settings dialog, there are a number of things there. Well, one is what I talked about already with the units of measurement being imperial or metric. We talked a little bit at the very, very start about GPS, and there are a bunch of settings around GPS. The accuracy is one of them. An interesting one is the provider. The provider is the integrated receiver because that's all I have right now, but I could Bluetooth to an external receiver like Travis did. And I do that by hitting the plus button. And there it's going to go try to discover a Bluetooth connection, which it's not going to find. Now that's why the screen is going to be blank. But if I had something Bluetooth, it would find it. The other thing that's interesting about it is antenna height. So if I click the edit button on this, I could actually edit this antenna height. So if you're really doing high accuracy and vertical is important to you, you can choose to set the antenna height. Okay, so the other thing is a provider. A location profile. The location profile is really useful if you're using an RTK correction source. So that's probably going to be in NAT83 if you're working in the United States. Your web map's probably going to be in WGS84, so if you want to do any high accuracy collection, you need to set a datum transformation or else you're not going to have accurate data. Okay, enough about collector. I probably went too deep on that. Chris has given me the look.
Well, Jeff, we're pretty much very close to being out of time, but I know this is a lot of good data, and I asked you to probably show a little more than an hour allows. But okay. I noticed the questions coming in during the webinar. Many of them you answered as you went through these demonstrations and your slides. One thing I would like you to spend a minute on, if you would, is related tables. So okay. I had a couple questions come in even previously to this webinar earlier in the month, and a lot of people are interested in that related tables. So
sure.
I'm going to give you just like 2 minutes.
2 minutes is all I got. Sorry, I kind of get carried away. You got to kick me and get too excited about collector.
It's cool stuff.
So here I am in ArcMap, and I've got a hydrants layer. And you see I've also got an inspections table, and we're going to do hydrant inspections here. Now you can see all of the fields that are here, right? There's a whole bunch of fields. An important one I just want to point out is that in the table that I want to create a relationship for is a new field called inspection ID, and it's of type GWID. That's really important because if we want to have the system maintain relationships for us, we need to establish that relationship between a global ID as the primary field and a GWID as the foreign key. Inside of my geodatabase, I can create a new relationship class. Let's call it hydrant inspections. Can we just go all day on this? Is that all right? We're going to go from our feature layer to our destination table, the inspections table. Keep it simple. We'll call it inspections to hydrants. And we'll say it's a one-to-many relationship because we're going to do a lot of inspections against those hydrants. We're going to, like I was saying, set up the relationship where the primary key on the hydrants layer is the global ID field. You have to have that global ID field. And the foreign key is not the global ID field. It's the GWID field so that we can maintain that relationship. The global ID from the feature layer is going to be passed automatically to the table into that GWID field. If you chose the global ID field, it would create something completely new. And then we can go and off we've created the relationship. Inside of the editor, you can test that relationship really easily by selecting a feature, going to the attributes dialog, and trying to add a new relationship to it and see if that's maintained. I recommend you try to do that before you publish. Now the last thing to mention on this is inside of ArcGIS inside of desktop in this catalog window, here I can sign in to ArcGIS Online, and so I can use that same username and password. Webinar water.webinar1, and if I tap the sign in button, it connects to it, and you can see the water violations when I already created. Now in the share dialog, share file share as service, I can publish the hydrants and its related table as a new web layer to the new feature service web layer directly in there. And I can, inside of this dialog, control that editing behavior and hit the publish button. So it's that simple to create those relationships directly inside of ArcMap for use within Collector. Also, just double check to make sure that the hydrant inspection table is in your map before you publish. It all needs to be in there in order to publish it as a feature service so you can use it in Collector. Probably a little bit more than 2 minutes. My apologies for that.
No, that was really good. I know we're out of time. I'd like to take maybe 5 extra minutes. We usually cut off right at 10, but there were a lot of questions surrounding ArcGIS Online for organizations and Portal for ArcGIS. If you could discuss the differences that affect us collectors specifically, and we'll go ahead and answer that and try to wrap things up. I know we're going a little long, but there were a lot of questions,
Yeah.
Jeff. So
that's like a 30-minute question right there for me.
We'll just summarize it. So think about what's the most important part concerning Collector.
Well, you saw when I went to sign in on Collector, I had the option of signing in to the portal or signing into ArcGIS Online. What's really important about the portal aspect is I can manage users the same way that I do with ArcGIS Online. I could use the identity store inside a portal, or I could use my own identity store for it. The important aspect, though, is how do you access the data that's behind your firewall, the maps, the services, and all of that on your mobile device when you're out in the field. And that's where you need to work with your IT group to make sure that you either have your web adapter set up outside of your firewall and you can reverse proxy through it, or you VPN from your device in order to gain access, or you get the device on the Wi-Fi, connect, download maps, go to the field, do data collection, then come back in the office when you are connected in sync. So that's the basics right there.
So it's a little more complicated if you're using Portal instead of ArcGIS Online.
More involved. You're going to have to talk to those IT people.
Oh, dang, some of us GIS people don't really get along with IT people.
Then you got ArcGIS Online for you.
Well, we're changing that. We're changing that. So it was a great webinar today. David, you usually have something to say. Did you want to jump in here?
Of course. Well, I wanted to remind, as Krista, with one water, it's also one GIS, one IT, one operations, right?
That's right. We should be one family as
yeah.
IT and GIS people.
The one thing I wanted to kind of press, and again, I get asked all year long at conferences, so, because folks will say, well, can I use Collector without desktop? And, do I need desktop? And the answer is yes. You can get started with just ArcGIS Online and Collector and start rolling. And as you saw Jeff use a template, right? So the feature service had all the attributes, had even valid values. That's if you're using one of the ArcGIS Raw Utility templates. If you don't use a template, really, ArcGIS Online is kind of this empty, this blank canvas that you can start adding data to. But really, the key feature, is when you use desktop, it will do those domains with the valid value list, so there's no typing involved. And as Jeff showed, there's really the only way that you can get relationship classes into your collector. So, desktop's highly encouraged but not required, right? So with desktop and collector and ArcGIS Online, you get your domains, you get those relationship classes. But if you don't have desktop, you can still get started right away with collector, use a template, all of the attributes are there, all those domains, those valid values are there, and you can get started right away. Because everyone's said, the less typing, the better. So I really encourage having those relationship classes and domain set. But yeah, this hopefully, this is a whirlwind tour. Maybe some of the basics, but Jeff always has those good tips and tricks. And the beauty of this, it's recorded. All your Q&A, Jeff and I will make sure we get that answered, and it will be posted to the meetup. But I just want to say thanks to all for a good year, and keep the questions coming, and we look for more exciting things in Collector in 2017. So, Jeff?
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jeff, for participating. I know you're never quite sure what you're getting into.
It's all good with you guys.
Thank you. All right, well, everyone, thank you for joining our last water webinar of 2016. In January 2017, we're going to have a sneak peek for our 2017 water conference that's going to be in Orlando February 7th through 9th. So registration coming soon for that webinar. Thank you, and have a great weekend.